Moving on to our next speaker is Rachael Power, who's the Works Manager from Action Mental Health. Rachael began her career as a teacher, but then moved into educational roles within the charity voluntary sector. She's gained a wealth of experience from working across many different areas of the sector, including homelessness, community development, good relations and social housing. So I'd like to welcome Rachael to the stage.
Good morning. Isn't it great to be at an event in person? It's so nice to see you all out in front of me rather than in little squares in front of me. Though I do feel a bit lonely because over the last 18 months, every time I've been speaking at something online, I've normally had my dog sitting on my knee. So I'm feeling a bit lonely up here by myself, but it is so great to see such a crowd here this morning and to know that you're here because you're interested in health and well-being of your staff, of your employees and of your colleagues, and that's what NIWHWC, that's what we're interested and passionate about as well. So we have a team that works with organisations delivering training and some consultancy around how employers can best help their staff to look after their mental health and well-being, because that not only benefits their staff but also the organisation as a whole. So this morning, that's the volume. There we go. So this morning I'm going to talk a bit about how we can create a positive culture in our workplaces relating to mental health and well-being, because so often it's so important about the language that we use, how we speak to each other about mental health and well-being, and the opportunities for staff to find out more about how they can support their own mental health and well-being with regards the workplace. So what is mental health? I'm sure you've see it everywhere, that people are always talking about mental health, especially after the last 18 months that we've all gone through. And very often when we say mental health, what we really mean is mental ill health, but the two terms are kind of used interchangeably. So mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual recognises his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and are able to contribute to their community. So we're all going to deal with some kind of pressures or some kind of stresses in our day-to-day life, but it's whenever those become more hard to deal with or become more long-term, that's whenever it moves into mental ill health. And very often we can think of mental ill health as being very static, as being very fixed. But mental ill health is a spectrum, or mental health is a spectrum, and we can find ourselves in the green area, and we can move up to the red. We can move between these 4 different areas, sometimes in a very short period of time. But everybody has mental health, and it's whenever we find ourselves up in the orange or the red, that's when it's moving into mental ill health. But we can all put some strategies and some coping mechanisms in place that make sure that we can stay in the green for as long as possible, or help us recognise when we are starting to move across the spectrum, and help us put some things in place to help us stay in the green for as long as possible. And as well as being on a spectrum, there's also a mental health continuum. And I think this is really important for organisations to be aware of. So if you look at you should be able to see all 4 quadrants. If you look at the top right quadrant of being a person with no mental illness or disorder and positive mental health, then down below it, a person with no diagnosed mental illness or disorder but who has poor mental health. Then beside it, a person with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness who has poor mental health. And then up above it, a person with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness but who copes well and has positive mental health. So you may have colleagues or people on your team who are in each of these quadrants, and you might not know, you might not be aware. And as people who have received a diagnosis, they're very able to go to work and live their life and contribute to their job very, very easily. But also they're in the same respect, there are people who maybe haven't had a diagnosis or who are struggling, and they're still turning up to work, getting on with their job as best they can. But again, it's not a case of, if you have been given a mental health diagnosis, that you're then fixed and stuck in one place. You move around, people move around this quadrant of being able to work effectively with strategies in place to help them cope with their mental health diagnosis, but still be a really effective member of their team within the organisation that they work for. And again, there's so much stigma around mental health that very often when somebody hears that somebody that they work with or somebody in a different team or somebody that they know has been given is a diagnosis relating to mental health, that they feel, oh, maybe they're not going to be able to, maybe that's not somebody I want working on this project. And there can be a lot of stigma, which then means we don't talk as openly about mental health. And I know we've shared some statistics already, but specifically with the last 18 months that we've been through, one statistic there to be aware of is around presenteeism, and especially with the blurred lines of working from home, living and work, the issues around presenteeism of people who maybe do or would need to take some time off, but feel like they can't take time off because we're working from home. I can't take a day off even though I'm sick. Sure, the laptop's just there. I'll open it and do some work, which again can have a really negative impact on people's mental health, and that can progress to them finding themselves in that red area of the spectrum. And again, as employees and people who are managing teams, we want to be modelling behaviours that our teams see, so that we take time off when we're feeling under the weather, that we are showing that we are practising what we preach, and that we take our own mental health and well-being as seriously as we take that of our team. Another issue around creating a positive culture with regards to mental health and well-being is, do your staff members feel comfortable talking to each other or talking to their line manager about mental health? And a statistic there of 31% think managers can have sensitive discussions, which is great, but then what about the other 69% who are feeling that they can't talk about this, can't talk about these more sensitive, more pastoral issues with their line managers? And very often line managers haven't been equipped or haven't been trained, or they feel that they can't have these conversations. And we at NIWHWC, we have a specific course that's designed for managers so that they really can feel, well, I can have these kind of conversations with my team. I can bring up these topics and know that I can deal with these conversations in a sensitive and appropriate way. And very often, especially as Northern Irish people, the language that we use around mental health is very different from the language that we use around our physical health. We're very comfortable talking about our ailments. That's very often our go-to conversation with small talk. I've had that terrible cold, or that flu's doing the rounds, or we know the right words and we know how to have those conversations. And it's very common. We can all relate. Even with more serious physical health issues, we can relate, and we know the kind of script of what we should say in these conversations. So we have a shared language around our physical health, and there's very little stigma around telling somebody, I've had tonsillitis or I've had the cold. We know what we can say in those situations, and really we want to see people being comfortable to talk about their mental health as comfortably as we can talk about our physical health. And what puts us off is some of that stigma of, I don't want to disclose this, or I don't want to share this because I don't know, will that change how that person thinks about me? Will that have an impact on my career? Will I be viewed differently within the team? We may not bring it up with our colleagues if we notice that they're maybe just not themselves, because we don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations, or we think maybe, well, this isn't appropriate for the workplace. We don't want to make ourselves feel uncomfortable. We don't know what to say. We don't really have a script or have those kind of common, sometimes shared experiences around mental health. And as well, we bring our own frame of reference. What do we think about mental health, mental ill health? We bring that into the conversation as well. And very often, we don't want to upset somebody, especially within working hours, 9 to 5. We don't want to say something that we worry will upset somebody or embarrass them. And so we don't have the shared language and experience that we have with physical health. So within an organisation, it doesn't happen overnight that we suddenly all become very comfortable talking about our mental ill health or our mental health, but there are definitely things that we can do to try and create that culture. And some of the things are investing in workplace wellbeing. So great to see Newry Chamber of Commerce and the Council saying that how important mental health is to them, and an event like this where we can learn more about what we can do to support our employees. So investing not only our own time, but also investing in the employees within the organisation. So thinking about staff training. A great way to encourage that shared language is to have some mental health training for everybody within the organisation, so that shared, everybody, top down, everybody is able to have some baseline knowledge of what mental health and mental ill health is, so that there can be that kind of water cooler conversation of, oh, I didn't know that was really interesting in that training, and that can really help. And again, please come and chat to me during the break if you would like to find out more about how NIWHWC can support you with that. Then also having an employee assistance programme. Very often when we're delivering training and we get asked, where's the best place to go to if I maybe need some counselling or I need some support, and we always tell people to make sure you know what your organisation offers within an employee assistance programme, because there may be some support that can be really quickly and easily accessed, and so to make sure that not only you know about it, but also your team and your colleagues know about it. And then finally, having really good policies and strategies that are properly implemented. They don't just sit on the shelf with the box ticked of, yes, we have our wellbeing policy in place, but actually that they're used and they're reviewed, and that your colleagues and team know that those policies and strategies exist, and they know what you offer as an organisation. And as I've mentioned, we do offer a range of training, and I wanted at an event like this, I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about one of our newest sessions, because I think it's really prevalent at the minute. We have all lived through a pandemic, which nobody in our lifetime has done before, and I know it's said all the time, but we just don't know how this is the long-lasting impact that this is going to have on us all, and then rippling out our colleagues, our teams, our staff members. And we've seen a big increase in organisations saying our staff are just kind of at the end of themselves, they're working from home, or frontline services, key workers. We've all been impacted. So I'm going to give you a bit of a shortened version of our burnout and rest session, but all our sessions have some kind of takeaways that people can use straight away, some strategies that they can try out to help with their mental health. So just looking at what burnout is. Burnout is a psychological syndrome occurring from prolonged chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And we include a little picture of a balloon here because we all need some stress in our lives, some healthy stress. I had the stress and pressure this morning of getting to Newry for 8 a.m, which is not a morning person. That was a lot of stress for me this morning. But I was able to handle it. It made sure that I was here and ready on time. And that's like the same as a balloon. A balloon needs air to fulfill its purpose of being a balloon. But it's when you overfill it and it gets to that breaking point, that's whenever you have problems. And it's the same with our mental health. We need some healthy pressures, but it's whenever they get too much and we're putting too much into the balloon, that's whenever we move into that red area of the spectrum. And for burnout, one of the issues is that very often we're not aware that we are progressing through the stages of burnout, that we are filling up the balloon. And the added pressure of the last 18 months, we're seeing a big increase in burnout. So 1 in 5 said that they felt unable to manage stress. Big increase in burnout during 2020. 3 top reported causes: working longer hours, inability to separate work and personal life, and uncertainty in the job market. 46% of UK workers feel more prone to extreme levels of stress. So they're feeling the pressure in that balloon. They're putting more and more air into the balloon. 23% of people knew what plans their employers had in place to help spot signs of chronic stress and burnout in employees. So obviously burnout is very specific to workplaces, and it is, as organisations and employers, it is part of our duty of care to look after mental health and well-being of our staff. And there are 5 stages of burnout, and it's always good to be aware of the stages, because very often we don't know that we're in burnout or that we're approaching burnout. So it's always good to be able to identify and do a bit of a check-in. Whereabouts am I on this? Am I in danger of overfilling the balloon. So stage 1 is the honeymoon. Maybe when we start a new job or a new project, we're feeling really energized, we've got good job satisfaction, and we're feeling really energetic. And it's good to know when we're at that point and to be able to say, okay, well, what can I do? How can I help? How can I make sure that I continue feeling some of these feelings as we get into the nitty-gritty and the day-to-day running of a program? Then stage 2 is the onset of stress. And it's when we start to notice some days that the balloon just gets a bit overfilled, but maybe we're able to release some of the pressure. It's not very regularly happening to us, but it's good to just be aware of, oh, I've had a few days this week when I'm feeling a bit stressed. I maybe need to keep an eye on that. Then stage 3, chronic stress. So we're feeling the same symptoms of stage 2, but it's happening more and more often. We're maybe a couple of days a week noticing that we're feeling a bit overwhelmed or lacking energy or not interested in the work that we're doing. And then stage 4, we find ourselves in burnout, and the symptoms can become critical at this point. So you maybe have complete neglect of personal needs, feeling very pessimistic, obsessing over very small things, and a desire to just drop out from society or drop out from the work that you've been doing. And then stage 5, we can get to the point where this has just become such a habit that this has just become how we are kind of progressing through our working life, that we get into a habitual stage of burnout. And you can imagine, I'm sure you've all experienced or can identify where you've been, especially over the last 18 months, where you've been across those 5 stages. And because this is workplace related, you may be able to see in some of your team members or your colleagues where they are maybe across those 5 stages. We always like to give some really practical ways that we can help manage our own mental health, help make sure that we aren't straying either into the red on the spectrum or progressing through those 5 stages of burnout. So some helpful tools that you can take away is a traffic light check-in. So thinking about those 5 stages of burnout or thinking about the spectrum and using that well-known analogy of a red light of traffic lights. Are you at green? How are you feeling? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling centered and able to cope with the daily pressures of your life? Are you maybe at amber, where you've maybe noticed a couple of days here and there, the pressure gets a bit overwhelming? And then if you're maybe noticing that you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed a lot of the time, then that's a point when maybe we would need to seek some more help. But again, it's good to be able to be self-aware and check in on our own mental health and be able to then model that for our teams. Another good tool is especially if it's a full-on day at work, if you're spinning plates everywhere, worried about plates dropping, being handed more plates, and starting to just feel overwhelmed, to write down all the things that are causing you some stress and look and see, well, what are the things that I can control? What are the things that I can influence? And what are the things that I can do nothing about and I just have to accept? And that is CIA. And then 3 things that help. I used this all the time over lockdown, and when me and my dog were working from home, I had a little post-it note up above my laptop that had 3 things that I could do straight away if I felt that I was moving into the orange. I could go and drink a glass of water, I could go and stand outside, and I could do a bit of yoga. Because very often when we get into that orange or red kind of area, it takes a lot of energy to get to be able to even think of, oh, what can I do to help myself feel a bit better? So if you have them written down, that removes a step. You don't even have to think about it. And then finally, one that we can do, and we use this a lot in our sessions, is there's all different kinds of breathing exercises. You can find lots of stuff on YouTube and online to help you regulate your breathing, which does such a lot to help us regulate our mental health. So just some tools to finish off that you can take away and even share with your teams. And as I said, I'll be at the back during the break. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you that you're interested and invested in the health and well-being of your teams and yourselves. Thank you.